This is a brief overview of some of the major battles of the American Revolutionary War, the American War for Independence. First thing to know, which we've discussed in class, it's a long war, 1775 to 1783. Here's a list of the major battles. There's many more beyond what's on this list here. But even from this list, we're only going to talk about a few. We're going to talk about the battles of Lexington and Concord. We're going to talk about the Battle of Trenton and Princeton. We're going to talk about the Battle of Saratoga. And then we're going to talk about the Battle of Yorktown. Not because the other battles aren't important, but there's a few ideas that I want to highlight using these battles as an example. So one, the Revolutionary War begins April 19th, 1775, up here in Massachusetts. The British are going to confiscate guns that the colonists have been secretly storing, guns and ammunition. And on their way to do this, the colonial militia comes out because Paul Revere had warned them, and the first shots of the Revolutionary War are going to be fired. War has begun. The first major battle is the Battle of Bunker Hill. What's interesting about the Battle of Bunker Hill, this also takes place in Massachusetts, in Boston. It takes place on June 17th, 1775. At the end of the day, it is the British who stand victorious on top of Bunker Hill. But it is considered a psychological victory for the Patriots for this reason. The British are arguably the most well-trained military in the world. England is considered a superpower. They wouldn't have used that exact term, but that's our modern-day lingo. The expectation, and these are a bunch of, and this army is going to be fighting a bunch of farmers and fishermen and merchants who don't have experience in war. The expectation was as soon as the British fire a few shots, the colonists are going to run away afraid for their lives. But that doesn't happen. The Patriots stand on top of Bunker Hill and fight back. They do end up retreating, but the only reason they retreat is because they ran out of ammunition. They didn't have enough supplies. It wasn't lack of courage. And that surprised the British Army. They were surprised that the Patriots put up such a fight. They actually thought the Revolutionary War was going to end this day, that this one battle, it's all over, and these colonists will know that the British are large and in charge. But because the Patriots fought back, even though they technically lost militarily, it was a psychological victory for the Patriots and the Patriot cause. July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence is signed. There's two battles that take place in New Jersey. The Battle of Trenton, and followed a few days later by the Battle of Princeton. What's important about the Battle of Trenton on December 26, 1776, is that it starts as a sneak attack by George Washington. Back then, armies usually did not fight in the wintertime. You went into winter quarters and waited till the better weather came in the springtime. So most people thought that the war was, they're taking the winter off. Washington crosses the Delaware River in the middle of the night very quietly on boats and from Pennsylvania into New Jersey, and they surprise attack the British and their and what are called Hessian troops, or troops from what we would call modern-day Germany, who have been hired by the British to fight along with them against the colonists. What's important about this is that the reason Washington did this is that the British had been winning battle after battle. The colonists lost New York. Washington and his troops had to retreat from New York down into New Jersey, and from New Jersey over into Pennsylvania. They're just getting beat. Washington knows that he needs to pick up the morale of his troops. He needs to have a victory. So he plans this attack on December 26th, 1776, because he knows that he has to boost the morale of his people. And it works. His army might have fallen apart. his army might have fallen apart and the war may have ended with a British victory, just because Washington's army may have just kind of disappeared, and people would be less and less willing to fight for a losing cause. But now, maybe it's not a losing cause. The battles of Trenton and Princeton are not necessarily huge military victories for George Washington, but they are victories nonetheless. They're enough of a victory for his troops to be like, yeah, maybe we can do this. Keep in mind, the war is still going to go on for a couple more years. October 17th, 1777, up here in Saratoga, New York. This is going to be another Patriot victory. Remember, the British win many more battles than the Patriots do. However, the Patriots win the important ones, it certainly seems. And this is an example. The Patriots defeat a British army in Saratoga. And the reason that is so important is because with this military victory from the Patriots, the French are going to come in and support the Patriot cause. So the French, who hate the British anyway, but they weren't sure they wanted to back the colonists because you don't want to back somebody that's going to end up ultimately losing. You want to back a winner. And the fact that the colonists, the Patriots, were able to win this Battle of Saratoga gave the French enough confidence in the Patriot cause that, you know what? Maybe these Patriots actually can defeat the British. And we're going to come out and we're going to be allies of the Patriots. So the French are going to become allies of the Patriots against the British. The long, cold, terrible winter from 1777 to 1778 in Valley Forge. There's actually no battles fought there, but again, they're undersupplied. A lot of times, some troops don't even have shoes, and there's snow on the ground. They don't have enough food. Congress is not doing a very good job of supplying them with the supplies that they need, and yet Washington is able to keep his army together over this tough, harsh, cold winter. The last major battle of the Revolutionary War is the Battle of Yorktown. October 19th, 1781. And what's the last battle? George Washington defeats General Cornwallis here in Yorktown, Virginia. But the reason that George Washington was able to defeat the British was because the French Navy was out here in the Atlantic Ocean. The British Navy was up here in New York. Had it not been for the French Navy, the British Navy would have been able to have sent reinforcements and resupplies down to Cornwallis, or sent ships down to Cornwallis so Cornwallis could retreat out on ships. However, the French Navy is here, and the British Navy is not going to be able to come in to support the army of General Cornwallis, and General Cornwallis is going to be trapped without an escape route, which would have been the British Navy, and he is ultimately going to have to surrender to George Washington. This is a huge defeat for the British. Remember, the British are still a major world power even after the Battle of Yorktown, but the British are so worn down from fighting this long war with the colonists that they're like, you know what? They agree finally on September 3rd of 1783. Way back here on July 4th, 1776, the colonists said that we are free and independent. Here, a few years later, the British finally agree. Yes, you are free and independent. You are your own country. You are no longer part of Great Britain. So that's a brief overview of some major battles. And think about the importance of military victories, psychological victories, the importance of having allies. And we will talk more about this in class. And no, you do not have to memorize dates. You do not have to memorize dates.